And okay, so let's do, we're going to begin with a meditation to try to set motivation and begin our meditation for the day. This is the practice day for the Wheel of Sharp Weapons, the mind training. And so let's try to, first of all, calm our mind. Sit comfortably. Relax your body. Find a good position. Relax your mind. And begin by placing your attention on the respiration. When you have a little success in calming the mind by using the respiration, bring your attention now further toward your inner heart, your heart chakra, as though withdrawing your attention away from the sense consciousnesses, like a tortoise withdrawing its limbs into the shell, in this case into the hermitage cave of your heart. And just use the mental consciousness to watch itself. First of all, the contents, but more importantly, what lies beneath the contents, the substratum of the mind within which all of the different appearances and conversations are taking place, the clear light nature of the mind. All the thought patterns, all of the images, all of the emotionally charged experiences within the mind are mere appearances. We spend our lives engaged in following those appearances. But here, see if you can let go of your attention to them and see, as though they were transparent, the nature of the mind behind them. When you let go of thoughts, recognizing that the spaciousness of the mind, its unobstructability, is what allows those thoughts to be present and to disappear. Try to focus on that understanding of the mind, that particular facet of it. Try to focus with wisdom. Let go again and again, even of the image you have of the mind. Especially let go of your sense of your body. Recalling that this is just a purely mental experience that can pay attention to different sense stimuli. And by letting go of your attention to the body consciousness, its apparent presence, the apparent presence of the physical body can begin to fade away. See if you can identify the sense of the ego, one of our main demons, as it were. Just the appearance of it not being so bad, but our mind accepting the existence of that, assenting to that, the ego grasping. Let go of this also, not yet with the wisdom that realizes its non-existence, but simply by not giving it energy, not buying into it. Ask yourself, if this I that seems to be so existent, that instigates my irritation and my desire, all my problems, interaction with others, the basis for my depression, and even pride and low self-esteem, if this doesn't exist at all, what would happen to those problems if I realized that? So recall that we have a very special opportunity right now, a life in which we have the freedom or leisure to practice Dharma. We're free from those states in which Dharma is really not possible to be practiced with any degree of intensity. The hell realms, is a spirit or an animal. A long-life God is a barbarian. Or when the Buddha has not descended, and so forth. Or if we were to, even now, holding very strong opinions, wrong views that would prevent us from practicing even if the Buddha's teachings were present. And we have all of the attributes necessary existing in the world today to practice the Dharma, to devote ourselves to it, which the opportunity, the juncture of this is very, very rare in the course of lifetimes. As though a blind turtle resting on the bottom of the ocean were to come up to the surface once in 100 years to take a gulp of air, it's like the proportion of time we spend in the upper realms for 1 second in 100 years. And only rarely sticking its neck through a golden yoke floating on the vast ocean surface. Very rarely, even when we come to the upper realms, do we encounter the Dharma, the Buddha's teachings, and the existence of Sangha and so forth that can help us to practice that. With this opportunity, we can begin to purify our negative karma, collect a virtue which we often ignore. We can develop realizations and the foundations for realizations. Our self becoming more and more content and satisfied, overcoming our fears and worries and depression. We can develop positive qualities, especially the bodhicitta in this lifetime, even an instant of which being created accumulates merit that could not be accumulated otherwise by eons of other kinds of virtuous practice. With such an opportunity, which is very rare, very difficult to find again in the future, but so precious, recognizing, however, that it's changing moment by moment. It's as though we're falling through time toward our inevitable death, the time of which totally uncertain. And this opportunity to create the causes for future lives' happiness, to prevent our falling to the lower realms, to create the causes to be cared for by compassionate teachers in the future, to be in association with the Dharma. This opportunity that we have to be creating those causes is disappearing with every instant. Thinking of all other living beings experiencing the same plight, wanting to be happy, wanting to be free of suffering, but caught up in the appearances of this lifetime, the petty victories, pleasures, transient pleasures, which are no more than mere relief, never finding any real pleasure. Anywhere within samsara, nothing, no state that we could hope for now to try to accomplish. Housing, resources, pleasures of the senses, companions, fame, whatever sentient beings might have, not real pleasure. Like taking one medicine comprised of poison in order to alleviate some symptoms. The samsaric pleasures themselves, like poison, when indulged in, create further suffering. All sentient beings are experiencing this, those that are still within cyclic existence, this vicious circle. The fundamental cause of which is a self-grasping mind that we begin to notice, our big egos, always wanting to be right, to be seen as right, to win the argument, to be seen as lovable. What has prevented us from attending to the plight of others as the Buddhas do has been that, and its cousin, so to speak, its companion, the self-cherishing attitude that once recognizing the ego identity, takes care of it, loves it more than others, cherishes it. To understand how other living beings are experiencing the suffering, we have to recognize how harmful it is in our own mind, to our own continuum. Whenever we experience unpleasant things this lifetime, the criticism of others, the disrespect, others leaving us, all of these are reflections of the wheel of karma, the wheel of sharp weapons that we've created in the past through our negative actions, motivated by self-cherishing thought and ego grasping. All of this is the boomerang effect of that coming back, the echo, the reflection in our karmic appearances. Beginning to recognize that, even on the level of conventional truth, practicing the training of the mind to develop bodhicitta, putting this unpleasant situation, adverse conditions, onto the self-cherishing thought, letting it bear the displeasure, the unpleasant situation, understanding that it can be eroded, the self-cherishing thought can be eroded, eliminated, exhausted. It can be ceased. And in so doing, we can find real freedom. We'll have the space then, being less needy, to work for others, accumulating merit that profits ourself, concerned about others' welfare, will avoid non-virtue and prevent the causes of our own future suffering. We'll seek out the Dharma, hearing, listening, contemplating, meditating with great effort, and get closer to enlightenment, which is the perfection of the two goals. Our own goal of utter, everlasting, blissful consciousness, no fears, no worries, and the aim of others, the ability to project whatever is necessary for others, to manifest the form bodies, the speech of the Buddha, the enlightened mind turning the wheel of Dharma. I think for that goal, in order to get closer to that goal, today I'm going to offer up this time, my energy, for that universal goal, for the welfare of all living beings. Motivating in that way, the karma that I create will become cause of bringing that about, my own enlightenment. So think, today I'm going to participate in the practice day in order to achieve awakening, my full potential, to eliminate all my faults for the welfare of all living beings. And then relax. Bring your attention back. Oma, would you like to sit? Yeah. No. Hi, Miriam. You come in. Have a seat. So, how's everyone doing? Oh, there's Bonnie. Okay. Oh, jeez. Okay. So, this is very close to the full moon of Sakadawa, the Vaisakha, special day of Buddha. Maybe it was yesterday, maybe some energy over today. So karma during this time very, very multiplied. So very auspicious. We have a chance to meditate on the training of the mind today, and especially this going over some of the ideas from the text that we've been studying, the Wheel of Sharp Weapons. Basically, you remember the sort of the gist of this kind of teaching, this kind of genre of instruction, is the training of the mind. So, what are we training the mind in? Concentration. What's the main thing we're training in? Yeah. Carl, you know. He's thinking. Who would make a stab? Alicia. Hey. Compassion. Keith has an idea, I think. Did you raise your hand? Okay, and that's not what's meant here by mind training. Judith knows. You could say that would be kind of right. Who would even be more precise? Say the topics Elaine knows. There you go. So it's as it says in the teachings, the special subject matter of the training of the mind is training the mind in the two bodhicittas. So the conventional bodhicitta, we know, conventional bodhicitta is what we've come to understand as what? Just compassion, right? Conventional bodhicitta is identical with compassion. Thea?
It's more than that.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say yes. What is bodhicitta, conventional bodhicitta?
Well, my memory summary of it is, it has a wish to benefit others as well.
So conventional bodhicitta follows. A conventional bodhicitta is a wish. Is that right? It's a mental factor.
Yes.
No, not exactly. We're getting there now. So first we know the topic of the training of the mind are the two bodhicittas. So first we investigate what conventional bodhicitta is. Conventional bodhicitta is a wish to free sentient beings from suffering, or the wish for enlightenment.
A special primary consciousness, accompanied by the aspiration to attain enlightenment for all sentient beings, and also compassion.
How did she know that? It just came out of some imprint in previous lives or previous classes. That's pretty close. That's very similar to the definition that we find in the textbooks of the great Mahayana masters over the years. So they debated about what is bodhicitta to get a very clear idea. Because as the title of the text says, how did it say? Maybe it's on here. It's not on the first page of this other one. The wheel weapon. Where's the actual? Where it says hitting the vital spot. What does it say? The first text that we have. The wheel weapon that strikes at the enemy's vital spot. So the vital, to strike at the vital spot, like you think, the animals in the past that were very able to survive in the wilds, they knew to fight their enemy, they had to if you just bit the other enemy's foot or their nose or something like that, it might buy you some time, but you were going to get killed eventually. In order to eliminate the enemy, you had to hit its vital spot quickly. Otherwise, it's going to destroy you. What would it go for, the animals in the past? Maybe the neck or the heart or something, right? The carnivorous animals. So although that seems very un-Buddhist to use as an example, unless we know what bodhicitta is, unless we know the vital spot, what we want to try to develop and what we want to try to eliminate, we'll be flailing around. We won't be able to make much progress quickly. So to know that one of the things we're trying to develop is conventional bodhicitta, and what it is in a sense the weapon, the positive weapon to eliminate what? This bodhicitta. Self-grasping, right? Self-grasping? Self-cherishing, right? Is there a difference between self-grasping and self-cherishing? Okay, good. So, conventional bodhicitta is Keith. Who's you keeping score? We have a little blackboard. 1 points for Keith and points for Elaine. And who comes? So bodhicitta, conventional bodhicitta, which is a primary mind, is a primary consciousness, but is accompanied by, it's associated with these two aspirations that Thea was talking about, one of which is wishing sentient beings to be free from suffering. That's a causal factor that creates this primary mind. It's always present, but it is acting to cause any moment of bodhicitta. At that moment, compassion may be present, but that compassion that's present at the moment of bodhicitta is the cause of another subsequent moment of the bodhicitta. And it has to have an aspiration. Sort of the special factor is it's aiming for, aspiring for enlightenment. So even as, from a Buddhist perspective, even the great compassionate thoughts of saints of other traditions, Jesus or whatever, from a Buddhist perspective, unless they were aiming for enlightenment, they wouldn't actually have the same power as this particular thought, as the Buddha taught. So conventional bodhicitta takes as the vital spot that it's aiming at is the self-cherishing thought. Right? Self-cherishing thought is what? What is self-cherishing thought? Is it something physical? Bonnie's looking down.
No, I was going to say bad.
Bad thought. Bad thought. It's our to really understand that you have to sort of taste it in your own experience. The thought that wants yourself to profit. The frame of mind that's constantly present, that in addition to apprehending the self, sort of within that context of apprehending a self-identity, wants the self to profit, wants the self to be best, in contradistinction to others. It's willing to put others up on the selling block, on the butcher's block, for one's own profit. It does not the self-cherishing thought is something that will ignore the happiness of others. And it's what causes us all our problem, because as a result of that self-cherishing thought, we engage in devious kind of activities, self-serving, sometimes unknowing, out of desperation, just worried about ourselves, self-pity, although that seems important sometimes. We have to take care of ourselves, don't we? Out of self-pity, we create so much, crazy energy. We become addicted to drugs. We become addicted to so many different kinds of things. Wanting ourselves to be happy. And so self-cherishing attitude, self-cherishing thought may be accompanied by, it may instigate many other kinds of states of mind, but it's a general kind of an awareness that is observing, having observed a sense of self, wants it, cherishes it. You know what the word cherish means, to hold very dear. Now, that's one of the enemies. So we have to be able to, in order to hit that vital spot, in order to eliminate it, like the example I've given many times of like having a sliver in your hand, and in order to really get it out, you have to find that spot with a needle. You ever done this, Keith? When you were a kid, your mom, she's pushing, is that it? No. When she got it, you found it. Then you can get out that sliver. Otherwise, if you're just carving up your hand everywhere else, it may take a long time, you get a lot of damage, and you may not even get it out. So we have to be able to identify the self-cherishing thought in our own continuum. And then in order to actually hit that spot, to actually destroy it, we need to have the energy to do so. We have to see the disadvantages of that self-cherishing thought. So that's what we're going to be meditating on today, that. And also seeing the disadvantages of the self-cherishing thought, but seeing that energy could be placed elsewhere. It could be outside cherishing others. So we could, seeing the benefits of, cherishing Keith. Not Keith cherishing Keith, but Elaine cherishing Keith. And the disadvantages of cherishing ourselves, the advantages of cherishing others, then we can start to, once you've begun to find in your own experience, like that, the general point, like the neck or the heart or the vital spot, the self-cherishing thought, then understanding its defects and the advantages of cherishing others, one can actually engage in activities to destroy that. Like what would be a method? Tonglen, perhaps, or the various training, the methods of training the mind. Yeah.
We're supposed to cherish all beings, wish all beings to be free from suffering. And we're a being as well, so we should, not be denigrating ourselves. We should have positive aspirations for our own happiness as well.
Definitely.
So I'm having trouble deciding where the self-cherishing becomes bad. Is it everything that's above the level of equanimity, where we're supposed to feel equanimity for all beings, and we're one of those beings, so when we cherish ourselves more than the level of equanimity of others, that's the part that's the self-cherishing that's bad, as opposed to self-cherishing that's good?
Well, there's no self-cherishing that's good, because self-cherishing here takes as its object not just the conventional self. On one hand, it's taking the sense of self that seems to be truly existent. It's different than the self-grasping mind. Okay, let's go a little bit further. Just take the other side. The mind training trains in the two bodhicittas. Conventional bodhicitta is an antidote to self-cherishing. Ultimate bodhicitta is the wisdom that realizes emptiness, or let's say the selflessness of the person. Is that how you define it, Keith? Ultimate bodhicitta? Have you heard that expression before?
I have heard that. I think that's a good
Oh, okay. It's not mine. It's Buddhist. Beautifully expressed. Ultimate bodhicitta. Does a Hinayana Arhat have ultimate bodhicitta because they realize emptiness? Dan?
I don't think so, because it's not for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Right, that's one way of putting it. Ultimate bodhicitta actually is not just the wisdom realizing emptiness, but the wisdom realizing emptiness within the continuum of someone who's developed conventional bodhicitta, right? That's the ultimate bodhicitta. That's why it's called bodhicitta. So Hinayana Arhats have, you could say, ultimate wisdom. They've realized ultimate reality, but they don't have ultimate bodhicitta because they don't have conventional bodhicitta.
Does conventional bodhicitta always have to come first? It seems in the teachings that that's the way.
Conventional, well, if you said between, maybe this might be an exam question, like if I said something like this. Which has to come first, conventional bodhicitta or ultimate bodhicitta?
Conventional.
Can't come before ultimate bodhicitta.
Right.
Why not?
Because ultimate bodhicitta depends upon the existence of conventional in
Bodhicitta.
condition of realizing emptiness.
Right. What could go before conventional bodhicitta, and does go before conventional bodhicitta in the cases of people of sharp intellect, is simply the realization of emptiness. That's not yet, if that precedes the generation of bodhicitta, that's not yet called ultimate bodhicitta. But that can become a cause for the development of bodhicitta, for those of sharp faculties, especially sharp wisdom. You know, you've heard this expression, sharp faculties, before? It's not kind of like an elitist kind of thing, you know. It's actually reflective upon the fact that we do it in various lifetimes. We have various of the faculties of wisdom and concentration and mindfulness and energy and so forth more acute. There might be times in our lifetime when they kind of diminish, right? Our faculties. It's not talking about the sense faculties, but in a sense maybe similar. We say someone who has sharp faculties, they can see well from a long distance. Maybe I could earlier when I was younger, see longer distances, you know, sharply. Sharp faculties in that sense. But here it's talking about especially the faculty of wisdom. So of the two kinds of practitioners of the training of the mind, those of sharp faculties train in the wisdom that realizes emptiness and actually make some realization of that first as a support of their development and practice of conventional bodhicitta. Almost seems contradictory, doesn't it? Sounds like, for some people, not for Bonnie. Bonnie's sharp faculty, so it's for her intuitively obvious that, as she's saying, no, it's not that intuitively obvious that to realize, you know, selflessness, emptiness first makes sense. if you do have that kind of progression, you can understanding that the self that you're cherishing doesn't exist. More easy to have the energy to use in trying to degrade that constant holding and cherishing of that I, knowing that it doesn't exist. I've mentioned before, His Holiness has said in some interviews that between the two, the mind of enlightenment and shunya, realization of emptiness, that in his own experience, he had experience first in this lifetime of realizing emptiness. And he's not showing off. He's not saying, I realized emptiness. He's just saying of the two, because actual experience of bodhicitta, although it's easy to talk about, actual experience of it is difficult in experience to generate. Whereas although emptiness and the wisdom that realizes it is difficult at first to try to enunciate, to kind of conceptualize, it can be actualized more quickly. Does that make sense to you? Beth? Is that make sense? Is that something you're familiar with, Venerable? That although emptiness seems at first, it seems like, well, that's really complicated. I'll do that later. Now I'll just work on bodhicitta. For individuals of lesser faculties, less wisdom, who are called followers of faith, also in the scriptures are called followers of faith, that may be, for them, they might try to pursue that kind of method to develop bodhicitta, leaving the wisdom later while they accumulate merit through the practice of attempting to cultivate conventional bodhicitta through the method of what? What method do they use? Do you know, Vin? Those of lesser faculties, followers of faith, which method to develop conventional bodhicitta do they use? Yeah, the 7 causes and effect, or as Venerable says, the 6 causes and 1 effect. Usually it just says the 7, the causes and the effects, which are what we're going to meditate today. Say Mashe, knowing mother, recognizing that all beings have been your mother. Remembering their kindness. That's good. Okay, some people know everything. Okay. What's the third one? Repaying their kindness, right? Is that what you're going to say? And then? Okay. Loving them. So just loving them, right? This one is could do with some analysis. This is what we call heartwarming love or affectionate love. Not full-fledged love. It's just a sense of warmth towards sentient beings. Not necessarily the full meaning of love that wants them to be endowed with happiness, but simply seeing them as attractive and warming to one's heart through remembering that they've been mother, or in the other methods by seeing how they've been kind to us and are the sources of our happiness in the future.
I think that one is like a mother for a child, so that's more than I was reading that.
This one is...
affectionate love like a mother feels for a child.
That might be even the love that a mother feels for her child might be even more than... of course, this is talking about for all sentient beings, not just a mother's love for one individual, but that mother's love for an individual might be very similar to something even more profound, like compassion also. This heartwarming love is a prelude to great compassion, right? And great love. Great love and great compassion are going to be coming together. This heartwarming love comes first, and it's just the sense that we can start to develop. If you started to recognize and keep in mind that every living being has been your mother and been kind as this life's mother, depthlessly, in numberless lifetimes, and everyone you look at having that feeling, that kind of feeling of warmth and friendliness and familiarity, regardless of what the appearances are now, is what's kind of meant by that So recalling mother, remembering their kindness, repaying their kindness, heartwarming love, then great compassion, developing great compassion, and then the exceptional thought, an extension of that it begins to investigate now, perhaps also the possibility of achieving enlightenment. If you're actually going to develop a real stable bodhicitta, and then the development, the seventh, the development of this mind of bodhicitta. So that's for the practitioners of lesser faculties we've mentioned before. That's the methodology that they would engage in. They wouldn't necessarily meditate so much on emptiness, but the followers of reasoning, that is to say, those of sharp faculties, are also called followers of reasoning, as opposed to followers of faith. The followers of reasoning, like most of you, like Bonnie, like Keith, these are people like, what's the expression I've used before? I'm from, what state is that called? The show me state?
Missouri.
I'm from Missouri. You know, I'm not going to, you know that expression, Alicia? I'm from Missouri, show me.
I understand.
It's like, you know, okay, you say this tractor is better, but until I see it, I'm not going to buy it. You know, until I know that something works. And so many of us have that kind of mind. If for instance, in terms of the stock market or some telemarketing or someone, if someone proves to you that something is good, then you may be interested. Otherwise, if they just say, "Oh, this is great," you know, some people might fall for that. But followers of reasoning have to see the logic of something, see the consistency. Then, on the basis of that, they can develop greater energy, perseverance into developing that. So followers of reasoning, where those of sharper faculties, have the ability to investigate emptiness from the beginning and see that this relationship between self-cherishing thought and self-grasping. They can see that the self-cherishing thought is related to the sense of I, and that if the I doesn't exist at all, there's no self that we have considered to be cherishing. But like your question, it's not as though we ignore the conventional self. I think self-cherishing has two aspects that distinguish it from just taking care of the conventional self. Bodhisattva does have an imperative to take care of his or her continuum, body and mind. It does have, you know, it's like a vessel that we have, or let's like say, I have my computer up in my room that I'm making DVDs for people. So that's a very, in a sense, for this particular time, it's a very precious kind of implement that I wouldn't just toss out or use to stir the stew with or something like that, you know. Or uses, you know, how to say, use to break, someone says, oh, we need a big heavy stone to break the wall. And I say, well, here, use this computer. Because at this point, that has great use. So this vessel, like body and mind right now, it would be foolish to use it, to waste it. And the Bodhisattva does have actually the vow, the imperative. See, Elaine has a Mac also, so she commiserates. Taking my computer, whacking it against the...
Smashing against the wall might bring happiness.
Yeah. Right. Well, no, as was it Bruce, right? Frank. Sorry, Frank. As Frank said, there are occasions when sometimes people would want to, you know, actually, yeah, take this computer and use it, you know. But if it's seen as something very valuable, the Bodhisattva recognizes. So self-cherishing is distinguished from that.
But when you aspire for the happiness of others, you're aspiring for their conventional selves too. What's the difference between aspiring for their conventional being or aspiring for mine? You
are in that group. The way to think of it is that you could be true. His Holiness has said sometime. Think of the following alternative. You have a choice of working for one of two groups, one of which has one individual, sort of like maybe in a black trench coat and a hat, whose back is turned to you. You could be working for this person. Or you could be working for here, all living beings. You're included in that group also over here. So, you know, with the capacity that you have, you could bring about the happiness of either this individual or all living beings. It's a no-brainer. Isn't that what we say in the same? I learned that.
Incredible. I've never heard that.
You've never heard that before?
That is so, it works for my mind.
Okay. Now Alicia's going to have this person turn around in the black trench coat and the hat, and then you see, it's actually me. Yeah, this is what I'm working for this group of one. And, a self-existent one on top of it, one that doesn't really exist. Whereas I could be working for the conventional happiness of all living beings.
In the other case, you're working equally for all of them.
You're working equally for all of them, yeah. And, but in training, to get to that state, you have to recognize that which is cherishing this I is hindering the cherishing of all beings. So you don't put emphasis, you don't try to, at the very beginning, you don't say, oh, but I have to cherish myself too. You recognize that the main obstacle to being able to cherish all living beings is the cherishing merely of one's own self, which is conception, which is grasped by self-grasping, also as truly existent. So it's a completely erroneous kind of state. Even the arhats who've eliminated self-grasping, right? They have the wisdom that realizes emptiness, the Hinayana arhats. Because they did not practice conventional bodhicitta beforehand, they are still familiar with the imprint, sort of like the smell of that self-grasping. They still cherish the self, even though they know there is no, they kind of see this black trench coat fellow or gal over here as illusory, but they still work for their own nirvana. They still work primarily for their own happiness like that. Let's take a stretch break here. If you need a cup of water or visit some location, just take a
If you could please try to explain another time for me that the main thing that I'm really confused about with this Buddhist perspective is this idea that there isn't an existing self. And I'm just really confused because it seems that, it's looked that we've all been alive since beginningless time and will continue to be alive forever. And we have what's called a continuum that reincarnates and reincarnates and incarnates. And like, for instance, the continuum of Beth isn't the continuum of George.
yes.
And will never be. And yet, it said, Beth, there is no self. This thing.
Okay, so that's very fundamental, very important to understand.
And let me just finish this. I'm just wondering if it's a linguistics thing.
No, it's not a linguistics thing.
Okay.
Well, depends on what you mean by linguistics. There is no truly existent self, but there is a conventionally existent self. The conventionally existent self we alluded to in the last class of the Wheel of Sharp Weapons when we were talking about ultimate bodhicitta. We talk about the conventional truth and ultimate truth. All the appearances to our mind now as ordinary beings, all of the appearances have imbued with them a sense as though they were findable somewhere. If I look at Beth as though there's real findable Beth somewhere, we recognize that, we call that a sense of true existence, the appearance of true existence. Both to our conceptual mind, even to our senses, things appear to be truly existent, as though findable within their parts somehow. That is the kind of self of persons and phenomena that Buddha was saying does not exist.
And has never existed.
Has never existed.
And will never exist.
No, it will never exist either. I think it exists for moment. No, it never exists. It never exists. It never has existed, never will exist. It's something which is impossible for things to exist that way. In the Hinayana teachings, the Buddha mainly just talked about there was no self or atma of the person, mainly talked about that. Incidentally, talked about the fact that there was no truly existent coffee, only in the, and not truly existent coffee, there's no self of coffee, he would say, in the Hinayana teachings, only to the extent that there's no self who enjoys coffee. So usually in the Hinayana teachings, it's not talked about so much the self of phenomena, the sense of true existence of phenomena. It's accepted that things do truly exist in the Hinayana, but that the self is something on another category. The self is something which is merely a name labeled to your body and mind, but there seems to be within the consciousness a sense of a self who's a controller, like the head of all of the aggregates, the boss woman, the boss man. When we talk in a more extensive sense, there is a conventionally existent self, even for the Hinayana, but in a different way. But in the Mahayana, we say there's a conventionally existent self. Beth does exist merely as the concept or name, the phenomena, which is an impermanent phenomena, the person, Beth, who is merely imputed or named to her aggregates, or conceptualized, even without giving a name, Beth, just thinking, my friend Beth, or even not saying the name, just looking and thinking Beth, or remembering conceptually, or like that.
Like, why doesn't Beth include this chair and this?
Because that's not conventionally. Usually, living beings don't impute the person onto anything other than their own personal continuum. They don't impute their clothes and their chairs and their house. So we have a conventional existence. We are an entity that does have a conventional existence, but the way that exists is not findable within those parts. You can't, when you look within the parts of Beth, you can't find a sense of soul or Bethness. The same way you look within the Mercedes, you can't find anything that's really Mercedes from its own side. It's just a label we give from the outside. So that self does exist, but that's not the self that's the problem. The self that's the problem, when you look in your own mind and you ask yourself, the ego is really rising, when someone has offended you, or you're angry, or you're attached, or you're worried, or fearful, or whatever, the self that seems to be appearing is much different than merely the name Beth given to your body and mind, that you can conceptually yourself give to your body and mind. I, Beth, exist because there is this set of 5 aggregates that can be labeled Beth. This is what my mommy labeled Beth or Elizabeth, or I don't know what the original name was. But other than that, there's no Beth existing from inside the way that it seems to be. That is the self that is being refuted here. That is the self that doesn't exist. That is the self which is the object of self-grasping, the ignorance, believing in that, grasping, holding to that is true, that instigates our anger and our worry and our attachment and so forth. So it's not as though we don't exist at all. So what continues from life to life is not a soul, the way that, this kind of sense of self or soul that seems to be apprehended in the mind, it can't be, actually, if you try to identify it with one part of the mind in deep concentration, you can kind of get a sense that there is that sense of I constantly appearing as though it really exists. It's that step, identifying the I, that's the first step in eliminating the ignorance grasping to it. So you have to first see the enemy, find out how the mind is apprehending it, and then through analysis, through wisdom, understand that it doesn't exist that way at all. It may still be appearing then, But then the mind that's grasping to it will be weakened, and maybe in meditation won't be present at all. Maybe in meditation on emptiness, even the self doesn't appear, only a vacuity, the security that it doesn't, there's no such thing, just total emptiness. During our lifetime, our aggregates continue. We have a gross continuum of body and mind, okay, gross mind and gross body. That is not the self, that continuum of the body and mind. Those are just the bases upon which we label the self. But even if you investigate those bases, the body itself is like a self also. When you think about the body, in meditation, when you have the sense of the body, it seems as though there's one findable entity, the body. Actually, body is only a name we label to these parts. That's another step in realizing emptiness, that even the bases that we impute, say the self to, the five aggregates, they themselves are empty. They have a conventional existence merely as names imputed to their parts. So then, if you ask what continues from life to life, in Tantra we would say the subtle mind and subtle wind continues. And you might say, wow, there's the soul. I knew there was a soul there somewhere. There's something that's... That itself does not exist truly, just as these aggregates don't exist truly. It does have a conventional existence, but it's merely labeled as the continuum. You can't find continuum anywhere on any instant of it, of that dependently arising phenomena. So perhaps to alleviate that kind of confusion, the Buddha didn't talk about the subtle mind and subtle wind in the sutra teachings, in the Hinayana or in the bodhisattva teachings so much. He didn't talk about this very subtlemost clear light mind and wind that's talked about in Tantra, perhaps because people might think, oh, that's the soul or self, like some kernel that continues on. There is a continuum that continues on from life to life, but it is merely imputed. It does not truly exist either. Just as Beth cannot be found in her aggregates, any one of the aggregates cannot be found within its parts either. And any one of the tiniest, like the tiniest atom. You might say, well, there, finally I found something that does exist. Everything else is imputed, but this final particle, this is truly existent. That also is merely imputed to its parts, the conventional existence of anything. So it's the constant familiarity with emptiness, meditating in many different ways like this, that what is called the correct view of emptiness can arise eventually. And then that will enhance the understanding of the selflessness of the person, because then you'll be getting a proper understanding of that. It won't be kind of skewed. Your mental image of that will be factually concordant, we would say. Okay, so Beth exists. So Beth is conventionally Beth exists, and the Bodhisattva, as Frank was mentioning before, asking about this, shouldn't we take care of the self, or should we just completely punish the self? No, we shouldn't punish the self. What the aim of finding this sensitive point, the vital point here, is to find the self-cherishing thought and punish the self-cherishing thought. Not to punish the conventional self, not by cutting the aggregates and, I'm not going to eat because the self is the problem. The self is not the problem. There is even the appearance of a truly existent self, that's not the main problem. The main problem is believing it. Someone could say, oh, there's a problem with mirages. We should ban mirages, or we should put something in the atmosphere so mirages don't take place, because they're the problem. Well, it's not the mirages. Even people who know about mirages, they see the mirage, they don't get excited about it, right? That's not the problem. It's the belief in the mirage that's the problem. So even the appearance of true existence is not the main problem for us within cyclic existence. It's the grasping to that. I don't know if we're if I'm touching the vital point of your question.
It's
Or
very helpful. It's
Yeah.
just, it seems like it's pretty deep and pretty, it's kind of tricky, like for people who haven't studied or, heard it explained in this way.
Yeah, that's why we have incredible fortune, all of you have the incredible fortune to be able to study something like this in more detail. Otherwise, although on the basis of faith, we could spend a whole lifetime trying to create merit and so forth, maybe we could make much more rapid progress through understanding more. As I've mentioned in one of the other classes that one of my teachers, Geshe Tekchok, used to say, a lot of times the students in the monastery, they wanted to go off and do retreat, while their studies were going on. Oh, this is just intellectual stuff. I want to do retreat. I want to be a yogi. But if you look at the people who try to do that in their whole lifetime, often people who don't study, try to do retreat, they give up after some amount of time. They don't have a deep understanding of the aim of what they're doing. Even their meditation itself doesn't have very strong power because what are they meditating on? To be able to meditate effectively, you have to, as the Buddha said, you have to first hear the teachings, listen, have a wisdom arisen from hearing. You have to think about that, contemplate that. There's another deeper wisdom that arises then from going beyond the mere words to try to understand the meaning. And then there's the wisdom arisen from meditation, when you actually familiarize that with a deep meditative concentration, no longer analyzing, just holding the meaning single-pointedly. That kind of succession of events has to be taking place. And so Lama Tsongkhapa said it's very important to integrate hearing and meditation. That is, while you hear, meditate on it. When you listen to the teachings and contemplate it and meditate on it, it's not as though you only do meditation and you ignore hearing and contemplation. And it's not as though you just become a scholar and you hear a lot of teachings and become expert and don't meditate on it. That's also a fault. So, yeah. Anyway, let's do a little more meditation. Let's again sit comfortably, find a good position. And again, try to calm the mind, first of all, very rapidly by due to your familiarity with watching the mind. See if you can let go of conceptual thoughts and worries. Just focusing on the breathing first. And then go back to the mind itself. Bring your attention further within to the place where you're learning to meditate, not in the sense consciousnesses, but within the mental consciousness. See if you can sense the current of emotion and thoughts, worries, preoccupations below the surface of your mind. And learn to let go of that also. Recognizing maybe you need a motivating factor, reminding yourself ultimately all of this will be seen as unimportant. It's impermanent, it's empty. Just focus on the substratum, the clarity of the mind. Let go, if you can, of the sense of the body. The ego. Now within this clear state is a foundation for either of the two methods to develop conventional bodhicitta. Try to imagine all living beings surrounding you in infinite space. Those that you know, those that you perceive, even the beings in hell, the pretas, the animals, perhaps manifesting as human so that you have a sense of camaraderie with them, a sense of familiarity with them, but all of them in experiencing all of these various sufferings find themselves in right now. Behind you, put your friends and family, those that you might tend to focus on. That is, imagine behind you your mother and father, your brothers and sisters, your grandparents, your aunts and uncles, other relatives, those that you feel close to, your spouses, your companions, your friends. Around in infinite space, all of the strangers, those that we don't know, or we're not familiar with, we don't feel particularly close to nor distant from. And particularly as a group in front, so-called, we might call enemies, those who push your buttons, who you're afraid of, frustrated with, angry towards, that somehow are a problem for you. So 3 groups: friends behind, enemies in front, strangers filling the other extent of space. And first investigate in your own experience, go through these 3 groups, see what it is, why it is that you feel particularly drawn to the friends, impartial or uninterested in the strangers, and you feel some disinterest or even anger or fear toward the 3rd category, the so-called, what we call them, enemies or strange enemies, yeah. we think we feel love, actually probably mixed with attachment for the friends, because of things they've said to us. Their actions this lifetime, in a very limited amount of time. They said some sweet words. They defended us. They gave us something. They gave us some affection or resources. Over a short period of time, really. What about the enemies? They too got their label and are grasping to that, usually due to some small event or sequence of events that our mind is held on to. They displeased us in some way, said harsh words, or didn't live up to our expectations. They didn't give us a fair deal. They hurt us. Or they hurt our friends, those that we're attached to, or they helped our other enemies. The strangers we see as even a different category because we haven't come in contact with them this lifetime. We're not intimately interested in their stories, usually, because they're not intimate to us. See if you can recognize, begin to analyze how these labels and our grasping to these categories are not real. They're not definite. They're not certain. Beings that are friends at one moment, although our mother this lifetime remains our mother this lifetime, perhaps that's certain. But whether she remains as our friend or our companions remain as our friends, it's uncertain. Sometimes friends later become enemies. The kids that we grew up with in grade school, high school, whatever, later, that we were very close friends with, later they might have become our most feared enemy, most detested enemy. And the enemies that we have now, try to recognize how that's not definite, that status that we're attributing to them. Many of them have been friends before. They didn't jump from being strangers to enemies, all of them, when we encountered them. And they can, and we know in our own experience, enemies sometimes can later become friends, calling in our own experience. Over our life, sometimes people that were problems for us later became allies, so important and cherished by us that we feared to lose their presence. And of course the strangers, as soon as we make contact with them this lifetime and we get to know them, we'll probably put them in one of those two categories, friends or enemies. I think there's nothing definite, nothing certain about these categories, friend, enemy, and stranger. Over numberless lifetimes, the enemies have been my mother countless times. They've been my closest companions. Due to karma in different lifetimes, we saw them as attractive, as lovable. The friends of this lifetime, in other lifetimes, have also been enemies, just as many times as the present enemies. we've been afraid of them. They've ate our flesh. They've threatened us, disappointed us, left us, stolen from us, harmed us. It's only due to the present situation, this brief life, and even amongst this, some brief incidents this lifetime, that they've been given in our mind the label friend. In the vast tapestry of time, the strangers have also equally been friends, enemies, and strangers, exactly in equal proportion to every other living being. The present friends are no more true friends than any of the strangers or the enemies. There's no true, certain, definite enemy. All of these relationships that we label are changing. And on the basis of them, those labels, out of attachment, we do things for the friends. Not out of real love, but out of attachment, often loyalty, sensing their real, true friendship, unaware of its uncertain nature, its indefiniteness. And we feel badly toward the enemies, either fear or repulsion, or even acting out sometimes violence toward those who are presently enemy, on the basis of some temporary harm they've given us, although over the large extent of time, they've been just as kind as the friends, just as kind as the strangers. The group of strangers also in the past have hunted us, killed us, threatened us, left us, hurt us, stolen from us, lied about us, harmed us in every possible way. And yet they've also been our mothers, our friends, our companions, our bosom buddies numberless times. Analyze a bit in this way and see if you can start to develop a understanding of the equality of living beings in terms of being friends, enemies, and strangers. There are no definite friends. The friend of today can become the enemy of tomorrow. There are no definite enemies. Enemies can again become friends, especially if we let go of holding to that label, open up our heart to the possibility of our recognizing them as friends, letting go of our grudges toward them, holding them as in these definite categories. In the vast enormity of sentient beings that we don't yet cognize as friends or enemies, they too have been intimately related as friends, feared as enemies, equally with all living beings. See if you can get a feeling of the equality of those behind you, the friends, with the enemies in front, with the strangers all around. All these appearances are due to karma. To the Buddha's perception, there are no real friends or real enemies. If different parties, different groups on one side of the Buddha were applying, soothing ointments and paste and perfume to his body, massaging him, caressing him kindly, praising him, and beings on the other side were to be slicing his flesh, cutting him, cursing him, the Buddha would perceive no difference in terms of his feelings toward them. There are no true friends or true enemies or true strangers. In thinking in this way, contemplating in this way, if you get a sense of the equality, let go of the analysis for some time and just focus on that single-pointedly. Try to hold that feeling, that taste, without any other disturbing thoughts. When you lose the intensity of that experience, again, analyze. Go to analytical meditation. Friends are only temporarily labeled such for small reasons. They have been enemies, perhaps even in this lifetime, let alone previous lives. Enemies, likewise, for some small event this lifetime, are called such, but have been friends numberless lives. Exactly equal with every sentient being, everyone, perhaps everyone else that we call stranger, that we don't recognize. We've been related with them over numberless lives, equally as friend, enemy, and stranger. Think further how it's so short-sighted to help friends out of attachment, but not to help enemies. Even the present enemy has helped us numberless times, has given us wealth and kindness and love and support, food and past lives, as though ignoring their kindness in the past, only limited in a limited way, recalling the kindness of someone right now. They're very short-sighted, like someone forgetting all the kindness their friends have shown them for a long period of time and becoming excited about a new friend who gives them a night on the town or some special gift, forgetting the immensity of the kindness of others. Very short-sighted. All living beings are equal in being worthy of recipients of our love, wishing them to have happiness, and worthy of being recipients of our compassion, wishing them to be free of suffering. If there was a definite enemy, maybe we could think, no, they deserve to suffer, but my friends should be free of suffering. In terms of the equality of being equally recipients of our, worthy of recipients, being recipients of our compassion, think as though we were a physician, someone who's able to solve incredible problems. If we were to discriminate when people came to us as patients only for our friends, how small-minded that would be. Or in terms of love and giving, how living beings are equally worthy of being recipients of our love. If beggars come to us, all of them equally in need, dying of hunger, if we were to give only to those we liked, not giving equally, giving out of partiality. Again, go back with your wisdom eye, looking at the enormity of sentient beings imagined around you, and see if you can develop this further Mahayana thought of equanimity. Not just that they're equal in terms of being friends, enemy, and strangers. There are no definite categories. But they're equal in being worthy, all of them, worthy of being recipients of our compassion, wanting them to be free of suffering. Equally worthy of being recipients of our love, wanting them to be happy. Even the present enemies. And bring your attention slowly back to the present. Venerable, how was your experience? Did you meditate? No? Okay.
In general, I enjoyed that meditation. I think it's something to try. I remember when I first started doing that, and it was probably Venerable Rita. She taught me meditation first.
Venerable Rita. Ah, you taught Venerable Angie meditation first. Did she teach equanimity? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So she's an old equanimous soul. Just appeared. Anyone have any observation about the meditation? Any questions? Have you done that meditation before? Equanimity meditation, Dan?
Yeah, someone.
Someone or someone?
Similar.
I just really had the experience
as I was feeling the friends and enemies and strangers around me, how there really is only friends and enemies and strangers of the self-cherishing and self-grasping thought. That that's what gets bugged, and that
Mhm.
that's what loves.
Yeah, like it says in the qualities of Buddha when we talk about refuge. Even if some people are applying sandalwood paste, so right now we don't consider that a big thing. In India, that might have been a great. Someone applying cooling sandalwood paste on one side of your body, caressing you, the other side cutting your flesh. The Buddha completely equanimous, not sensing one is a friend and one is an enemy, seeing the bigger picture. So I find, for my own mind, kind of thinking like, how a tapestry, the threads going through the tapestry, they might have different relationships at different points. Sometimes they might be separated, sometimes they might be near. Not in all, usually they go straight through, but think of it sort of a three-dimensional, four-dimensional tapestry in time, all of our mind streams, not our souls, going in different, sometimes, entwined with different filaments of other ones in some, maybe succession of lifetimes or one lifetime, sometimes in a harmonious sort of appearance of the tapestry, sometimes is unharmonious and seemingly discordant, but all exactly equal with everyone else over the course of time. So of course, even knowing that, it's not as though the lamas go around and great beings, yogis and meditators, it's not as though they have no close relationships with some people, because of karma and appearances, we do have some individuals we can help more, some that are in more need right now, and so some that we can help more because of the fact that they are, let's say, for instance, the insect or the, whatever, may not be able to be capable of being helped in the same way that a teacher's students could be helped by them. So they may pay more attention in this lifetime. It's not as though they're ignoring the insects or whatever. In fact, they take care of the insects when there's a need to, and on the realm of what they can do to protect them from being harmed and so forth. But because they can teach the students right now, they may appear to be partial to the students, but they're not. So it might look that way, but in our own mind we can recognize that. It's said that this meditation on equanimity is the basis, the foundation for all of the meditations on bodhicitta, whether it be through the 7 methods of cause and effect, or the other method, which is called equalizing and exchanging self and others. It's kind of the basis for all of those. In the example in the scriptures is that, and it just as when the sun rises on the plain in the morning, the light illuminates everything equally. And it's in time, as the sun rises to the zenith, to the high point, then the intensity of the warmth increases everywhere. Likewise, we should start, rather than starting to try to increase our sense of affection only for those that please us, that's not the successful way to do it. You should be like the sun, that we first feel an equal warmth toward all living beings and try to increase that so that you're increasing it equally for all sentient beings rather than just trying to love your lovers more or something like that. Someone's like, oh, I'm practicing bodhicitta, now I'm loving my companions more. But people at work, they can go to hell, something like that. That wouldn't be developing a real sense of love and compassion, because it would be partial. So this kind of impartial equanimity is very important. Remember, some of you who were in the low rate class, we talked about the mental factor equanimity the other day, and the equanimity of feeling, of the sensations, equal feeling between pleasure and pain. This is this kind of, and then there's an equanimity, which is the mental factor, the virtuous mental factor, which is the ability to not, to let go of applying the antidote when you're meditating, just letting go and relaxing. different kinds of meaning of equanimity. So this equanimity falls similar to the one like limitless equanimity, not being partial.
I was thinking how in dreams, like we'll interact with all these beings that supposedly in our waking life we don't know, but we have this whole thing going on,
Uh-huh.
or friends or enemies or...
New ones, you mean, in the dream?
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking about that, like, strangers that supposedly we don't know in this
Mhm.
waking life.
Well, certainly there are people, there are people in this lifetime that, you just have to travel around and you see lots of strangers, but as soon as you get to talk to them, either they become close friends or they become enemies, or at least they're put in one of those categories. Do you keep anyone still as after you've met them, would they still remain as stranger? Would you be either kind of, they're not in that sort of category in the middle any longer. They're kind of either one side or the other, kind of like doubt, isn't it?
What about sadness? What happens for me when I think of my enemies is that I find that I'm labeling them as my enemies because I see them harming each other, harming other people, harming the environment, and I get a sadness from that.
Mm-hmm. So I think my understanding would be that it would be more advantageous not to think of them as enemies, like Shantideva says in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara. If there is any enemy, the enemy is the self-cherishing thought and self-grasping in our own continuum and in the continua of others. So rather than being angry, if you label people as enemy, like they're destroying the environment, or they're destroying the happiness of others, so they're bad, or they are destroying the economy, or whatever, let's recall the governor, he's destroying the economy, whatever, rather than that, to see the crux of the problem, and the same way that we begin to experience in our own practice of the training of the mind, the real enemy is within, and it's that we would like to destroy, the self-cherishing thought and the anger and the greed and so forth in the minds of sentient beings. What's the best way to do that? Put them in jail? Beat them? I don't think so. Pardon?
Don't vote for him.
Don't vote for him. That's not going to eliminate that demon. That's just ways of dealing with the present appearances, right? So, thinking, having cultivated compassion and love, knowing that those beings have been our friends numberless times in the past, to try to. This is what we do. First of all, we equalize them. Then we try to warm up the feeling by recognizing the positive side. All of these living beings have been my mother numberless times in the past. Every single one of them. It's one of the methods, especially suitable for those of the followers of faith. Also, we should sharpen our mind with that also. It's not as though that's only for dumb people or something like that. His Holiness said sometimes in meditating on bodhicitta, he finds over some period of time, maybe a month or a year or so, one of the methods is very, very useful. It's like the knife is sharp, can cut the paper. The other is not doing so well. So then at a certain point, one method doesn't lead to as much progress, and you might switch over to putting time on the other method of developing bodhicitta. But still, based on this sense of equanimity and a view of what the real goal is, to alleviate the suffering of sentient beings, is not going to be brought about by killing the Saddam Husseins, or I was going to say the George Bushes, I shouldn't say that. Eliminating the so-called harmers, but we should be eliminating the harm within their mind. And sometimes there's no other alternative maybe but to incarcerate them or to hold them or to even use wrathful means to prevent them from harming others, but not out of anger toward that person. The most advantageous thing would be a situation where you could actually counsel them, where you were in a situation where you could eliminate from their mind through the direct teachings, the self-cherishing thought and self-grasping. That'd be the greatest skillful, peaceful means to be able to do that. And when we talk about the four kinds of actions, the peace, increase, influence or power they call, and wrath, sometimes we have to use, bodhisattva might have to use some semblance of wrathful or means, but it's always best to try peaceful means first, that would be the situation when people's minds have already been ripened, and by giving them advice, they can listen to that, they can be attentive because of the karmic connection, good karmic connection you created with them in previous lives. They pay attention to what you said. Whereas if we create animosity toward them, and in future lifetimes even we want to teach them, they're going to ignore. You say that, but I don't know. Or what do the kids say now? Whatever. You should be kind, If you give, you get love. If you want to be loved, you should love. Whatever, Maybe they won't listen to us, So, rather than hating the outer person, you should, if anything, Shantideva says, you should hate the delusion. If there's any object that's worthy of hate and worthy to be destroyed, it should be that. That should be your wrathful Yamantaka should be destroying that. Karen, did you have?
Is the sadness the beginning of feeling some compassion for their suffering? Is that?
Sadness, I'm not quite sure what sadness. Sadness might be unhappiness, right?
Yeah, it's also, I think you just touched on it, it's also they're hurting themselves.
Feeling for their
They're hurting
suffering.
themselves too.
Yeah.
Beginning to understand that.
But when we talk about sadness in terms of recognizing what that is, it's a feeling within the mental consciousness. It's what we might call unpleasant feeling of mind or unhappiness, or you call it sadness. That can be the precursor of anger, sadness. In fact, Shantideva says in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, if there's something you can do about this situation, there's no need to be unhappy. In other words, do what can be done. If there's nothing you can do about the situation, what's the sense of being unhappy? Yeah. So the point why he doesn't mention there's no need to be angry is because unhappiness is the cause of anger and hatred and so forth. It's the first, from unpleasant feelings, we develop anger. From pleasant feelings, we develop attachment and so forth. So if we can always keep a happy mind, we can avoid, in that way, getting angry.
So the feeling, instead of feeling sadness, is it meaning you should feel anything? Which would be the positive and the positive?
So instead of feeling, sadness, I think, can be, for the Bodhisattva would feel sadness even to the point of crying, Like His Holiness, when he thinks about suffering, sometimes he begins to cry. The middle of teachings, the great Kadampa Geshe, Kanglumpa, it was called the Crying Geshe. Whenever he thought of the suffering of beings in the lower realms, he began to cry. So sadness, it depends on whether that's being apprehended in the right way. If we're grasped with ego grasping, the sadness can become the cause of anger. But apprehended within a state of cherishing others, sadness can be a motivation for compassion, wanting them to be free of that suffering. Often our sadness is just self-pity, right? I'll just take a break so that Alicia can change the guts. You can leave that on. Just leave that going. Just 1 second here. It takes his time.
Unhappiness can be the cause of this.
Yeah, I got that.
Okay. Okay, so who had a question over here? Miriam had a question.
Venerable George, there is any difference between the wisdom as a method and
The wish?
the wisdom
Wisdom?
as a method?
Wisdom as a method.
And ultimate bodhisattva.
Generally, we distinguish between method and wisdom. Method is how we deal with, in a sense, how we deal with conventional appearances. So it involves understanding karma, that's, restraining from negativities out of wishing to be free of suffering is method. And creating virtue out of desiring to find happiness in the future is proper method, skillful means. Skillful means also is greater, perhaps, is a sense of renunciation, seeing all of the appearances of attractive appearances within cyclic existence, not only the unattractive, but even the attractive, as illusory, as actually suffering, as like chaff, uninteresting, and desiring the bliss of nirvana, where all those disturbing thoughts are quelled. That's also skillful means. Skillful means is also bodhicitta, dealing with conventional appearances, instead of getting caught up with the sadness and, like Keith was asking, and maybe using it to allow anger to rise in your mind, or self-pity, using the appearances within cyclic existence to generate compassion and love for sentient beings, bodhicitta. Also, I think there are different kinds of wisdom, say the wisdom of impermanence and so forth. To a certain extent, maybe the wisdom of impermanence would be categorized as method, because it's dealing with conventional appearances. Usually when we talk about wisdom in the pair method and wisdom, we're not just talking about wisdom of impermanence or other kinds of wisdom. We're talking about the wisdom that apprehends ultimate reality, ultimate truth. So, I think, I may be wrong, but I think the wisdom that apprehends impermanence and so forth is properly considered skillful means, even though it has the word wisdom in it. When we talk about the pair method and wisdom, the wisdom in that pair refers to the wisdom of emptiness. Just like in the term salam. Remember, some of you did the course, the grounds and paths. In the pair salam, or grounds and paths, ground doesn't refer to the earth in which you grow plants, although it's the same word. In that pair, it refers to the different kinds of states on the path that act as bases for realizations that rely upon them, just as the ground acts as a basis for the plants and all the animate and inanimate things that grow on the earth. So when we talk about the pair method and wisdom, wisdom refers to ultimate wisdom, I think. Does someone else have a question? Okay. So,
It's not really a question.
oh, observation.
It's just a little bit of a comment that, because I heard you say it, and I myself have thought before about like the self-cherishing, destroying the enemy, self-cherishing. But when I've thought of that self-cherishing as existing in someone else's mind, I don't know, I guess I have a very weak mind, because suddenly it becomes quite concrete. And it's their self-existing delusions that I have a problem with.
Right. Yeah.
So
They
it
have.
really-
It
actually takes me out of the experience of bodhicitta and puts me in like a, I don't know, almost like a pious sort of, not a genuinely. So I usually kind of try to vacillate either between thinking, oh, this could be an enlightened being, manifesting like this, so that I can feel so I can see what isn't right and I can feel compassion. Or I think it's my crappy, horrible mind, and I have actually created this appearance. Like they're polluting the world. They're not self-existently polluting the world. They're not self-existently creating the world. It's not them. It's me. It's my karmic appearance. And I just felt like it was important to say that only because my own mind totally can sometimes fixate on other people's self-existent illusions.
Well, yeah, but what we have to do is we have to use our own experience. Let's say, for instance, when we feel down on ourselves that we're just bad, we can help to eliminate that by recognizing that others, how we can feel compassion for others, even though they have faults, how recognizing how they have Buddha potential, they can change, they could get better, they can be educated, even they can purify that negative karma, so can I. When we start to concretize the other parties, we have to go back and look at ourselves and say, these things, the failings that I see in others, isn't it kind of, what's it called, conventional wisdom that the things we see in others are often the things that we're oblivious of in ourselves, the faults that we see in others. Or the things that we're most critical of in ourselves, the failings that we partially perceive in ourselves and we're most critical of, and then we find them incredibly difficult to bear in others. So if you notice faults in others, to go use that as an opportunity to see, okay, I have something similar to that, and that can be, I can kind of be patient with myself. Not like I'm complacent and patient with it, I can continue on, but I can say, I'm still lovable, even though I have that fault, others should still love me. I do have that fault, but still I'm lovable. We have that feeling. Same thing with others. So you can go back and forth like that. In fact, in order to really develop bodhicitta, there's no way to develop bodhicitta until you have some understanding of renunciation, which is an understanding of your own plight within cyclic existence. Otherwise, it's very difficult to feel compassion for those who are rich and famous. Think, how could I feel compassion for them? They've got it, they're not suffering. Actually, they're suffering just as much as the beings in hell. But we don't recognize it. We call that samsaric happiness, but it's the same nature of suffering, dukkha. So we have to recognize, first we practice training the mind in the meditations of the individual of intermediate scope to act as a basis for that training in bodhicitta, the meditation of the beings of higher scope. So they can help one another like that. And also when you feel down on yourself, when you have low self-esteem or you feel guilt or whatever, to meditate, sometimes it helps to, your own problems become oblivious sometime when you meditate on compassion for others. When you think of the problems of others, your own problems become so small. When you think you're down and out, go work in a soup kitchen for some time, or go and talk to people and hear their problems. And, oh my gosh, so complicated. You think